Hello and welcome back to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener. As you can see, winter has arrived, and my original plan was actually to do some pruning over this weekend and do the part 2 to the pruning video that we made a couple of 3 weeks back. So I wanted to see if I could get the currants sorted out today. But that's no longer going to happen with all this extremely cold weather we're having. Now it's currently about -3 here in our garden. It did get down to about -5 to 6 last night. And yeah, everything is rather white. So I thought what we'd do today instead was just show you a little bit of the garden. Especially for those of you that maybe are new to gardening, because you might get up in the morning and go to look at your plot and think, oh. Well, you don't need to think, oh, because the great thing about the plants that you planted back in June and July for a harvest any time now into next year is that they are very hardy. And they're supposed to be growing at this time of the year. So they will put up with a certain amount of frost. Now, you saw me at the beginning. You saw me at the beginning raking these leaves, and as I've sort of mentioned several times, you know, behind this plot here we have woodland. It's like a weekly ritual actually to come up here and do it all over again and rake yet more leaves up. But one thing I did just want to show you is the value of mulches. I think it was Thursday. Today is Sunday. I think it was last Thursday that I harvested some leeks, and it was particularly cold and I was particularly in a hurry. So rather unusually for myself, I left some bits and pieces over the soil, the leaves from the leeks that I didn't want, and equally I didn't clear up the leaves. And if you see here where there are no leaves, that is rock hard. And now if you look here where the leaves were and the leek leaves were, you can see just how soft that soil still is. So if you needed a better example of why it's a really good thing to mulch, there's a perfect example. It's actually kept that soil warmer than the soil there which is uncovered, but also it's still pretty moist under there. It's not dry, so it has the reverse effect in summer. Now, I'm standing underneath here and it feels like Christmas Day because clearly the sun is out this morning. It is slowly starting to melt the trees above me and I can see white flakes in front of me. Or maybe I'm in a dream and in a globe and somebody's shaking that globe. However, what we all do know is that on things like lawns, you know, leaves are a bit of a pain and they do make the garden look untidy. So it's a time when we actually do want to be getting these up and off the lawn. Normally it's really wet this time of year, through the back part of autumn and into the first month of December for us here in Norfolk. We don't usually experience such severe frosts like we're seeing at the moment. Maybe once every few years we might see this, but in the main it's normally much milder than this, obviously, and it's much wetter. So to actually clear these leaves up is not a particularly nice task because your hands get really cold and wet. It's difficult to rake because they are so wet and slimy. But equally we also know that the leaves make a nice leaf mould that we can use on our gardens. So when the weather is like this, do take advantage of it. You've got a rake. I've got two types. I've got the plastic one and I've got the normal rake that I would level the soil with. When it's cold, you can rake the leaves up with relative ease. Don't be too harsh with it, because if not you'll end up ripping your grass out, which you don't want to do. But if you just gently move it along, you can start to make your pile of leaves. And then get those either into a leaf compost bin that you can make, or if you don't have the space for that, you can just pop these into a black plastic bag, put a few holes in it, pierce them, not big holes, pierce them, and just leave that bag behind the back of your shed, and in 18 months, a couple of years time, that's some really nice leaf mould to be able to use on your garden. Now here in bed 4, as if you're a regular watcher of our videos, you will know that this is where we've grown some brassicas, and underneath here is our purple sprouting broccoli. Now what I just want to show you, this is frozen solid. It is actually starting to melt now. It's about what, 20 past 10, and the sun's been up for a couple of hours, so it is starting to melt, but only really slowly. When I came out here first thing this morning, it really was crisp and hard. So this is what it looks like underneath here, and you can see, yes, of course there's going to be some frosting. You're not going to escape that with a -5 or 6 frost, but in the main, this cover that we've put over has protected them. You know, they don't look like they're dying. They've wilted a bit, of course they will. I think we'd all wilt if we were out in this really freezing cold weather. It doesn't affect the harvests, so they're still there. And actually, now that the leaves have drooped down, it gives you a better chance to see just how much is actually starting to come on this plant. There's not going to be long before we actually pick the central head, which will encourage yet more side shoots to come. Like I was saying earlier, these plants, you know, it's their time. If they were going to be put off by cold, frosty weather, there would be no point in us growing them. But what we can do is to help them along by protecting them. As you know, we also need to cloche our brassicas, because with the woodland being up there, the pigeons are always circling at this time of the year, and they're looking for some nice greens to peck on, so we have to keep them covered anyway. But in all honesty, knowing that all this weather is coming, and you know, we all have the apps these days, you know, if you cover your plants, that will go some way to help protecting them in the harshest of frosts that we can get. Now there is one plant that loves a bit of frost, and that's Mr. Parsnip. And you can see the top of this parsnip here. But what you'll also be able to observe is it's still really frosty here. The ground is rock hard. You're never going to get that parsnip out of there without either breaking your foot because the ground is hard when you go to put your fork in, or you'll break the parsnip. But basically, it's a really bad idea to be trying to harvest any root vegetables when the ground is like this. It is far better if you can plan and do that by, obviously you can keep an eye on the weather that appears on your television. There's a lovely red robin just over there. We can all watch the weather on the TV and see what they have to say. There are also various weather apps that you can get and put on your phone. I use one, and I know we all sort of say that the weather people got it wrong again today, but actually, in all fairness, you know, they're not a million miles away, are they? Alright, so maybe it wasn't -8 last night, but it was certainly -6. If they say it's going to freeze, then it's likely to freeze. And then what you can do is to plan what you need to do for the rest of the week. So we've known since last Wednesday that It's likely to be a really, really cold weekend and through into the beginning part of this coming week. So we've ensured that we've harvested, in particular our root vegetables, so that we have enough to see us through until this current cold spell actually starts to disperse and go away. Looking at the weather forecast this morning, it's looking like by Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we're still going to have overnight frosts, but by day, at least it is going to get up to 3 or 4 degrees. Yeah. When temperatures are like this, just try and think a couple of 3 days ahead on what you actually want out of your plot to see you through until the current spell is over. Now, we talked about the parsnips and how they benefit from the frost. We've talked about that many a time, how they sweeten them up. It's the same with the sprouts. Now, I'm not going to lift this up on this occasion. We saw them the other week, and you'll see them again when we do our harvest a bit later on in the month. But yeah, sprouts are another one of those lovely plants that benefit from a bit of frost and actually helps to sweeten them up. So having a frost sometimes is not all bad. It actually does quite a lot of good in the garden too. All we have to do as gardeners is try and think ahead, get some plans in place, and we can continue harvesting, we can continue enjoying all of this lovely food. One thing I didn't need to do, and I haven't mentioned, but the carrots. We harvested many carrots right at the back end of September. In fact, I think it was into October we harvested those, wasn't it? And we put them all into sacks, and they've been in our outbuildings. We can use them. They've actually stored fine. We're using them, so the fact that we can't get carrots out of the ground, we do have that option there to be using those until this weather just starts to thaw a bit and we can get things out of the ground again. Now, we always take a chance every year and we pop some broad beans in autumn to get a head start and to get a slightly earlier harvest next year. Some years it works perfectly well, some years it doesn't work quite so well. But one thing that you always want to do if you're putting new plants in during the November period, such as broad beans, is to cover them. Yeah, put a cloche over them because they are very young and they are vulnerable. And you can see that we put this cloche over ours. You can see that it's still very, very frosty, nice and crisp. What I'm hoping is that we will find some plants under here that are probably very cold, but are surviving. So let's have a look. In fact, it's stuck to the ground. Oh, there we are. So this cloche, as far as I'm concerned, has done its job. It's protected these plants. And you can see, yeah, of course they look cold, poor things. But this is a very hardy variety, Aqua Dulce, and it's one that is recommended for overwintering. Hello, Scylla. Hello. You come to have a look, eh? You come to have a look? Yes, very cold, isn't it? I wouldn't go too far under there if I were you, because I'd be putting the clutch back. So yeah, this variety is bred for overwintering, and of course they're always going to experience some frost at some point between now and when the harvest comes. Like I said earlier, for us normally this sort of weather we experience late January and into February. That's normally when we get these really harsh frosts. It's just happened a bit earlier. So I'm mindful of that these plants are so young. But what I do have, I still have lots of seed left over. In fact, we also have some plants that were in the greenhouse that were left over. And they're not suffering from the frost so much, but they are actually now starting to suffer from the room that they have in the pots, because they're actually flopping right over. So I think what I am going to do when we finish filming this is to just move them onto a slightly bigger pot to keep those going and keep them in the greenhouse where they're a bit more protected than being outside, so that if we do lose any of these, we can just pop those straight into the ground. So here are these broad beans, and you can see they're a good 12 inches tall now, so they really do need to be potted on. So there's a job I'm going to do as soon as we just film this. Now in the greenhouse, we did mention the jobs for the month, I think. I hope I did anyway, about maintaining or keeping an eye on the temperature in your greenhouse. Now as an example, yesterday morning I came up here and it was a very misty day, very foggy, and of course a real good frost. And the temperature never got above freezing, not at all. At 10 o'clock yesterday morning when I came out here, it was still -3 outside, as it is today. It's still -3 out there. But there was subtle differences because there was mist and fog around yesterday. When I checked this temperature gauge, it was 0 degrees in here. So it is a different kind of day undercover than it is out there, because it wasn't freezing in here, and these plants have not frozen. Neither have they in the polytunnel. But today we have a similar situation. The only difference is that there is no fog and there is no mist. The sun is shining. Still -3 out there, but today in here it is almost 10 degrees. Differences in the way the weather affects things, not only outside but undercover as well. Which brings me on to things like watering. You don't want to be overwatering everything at this time of the year because it is quite cold and it won't evaporate so quickly. But equally, plants do still need watering. And actually, bizarrely enough, even the ones outside, once the frost disappears, they still need watering every now and again. We can sometimes go a week or more without any rain falling. Then all of a sudden we'll get a week when it does nothing but rain. So keep an eye on your plants, make sure they're not stressed. Are they showing signs that they need some water? Do the finger test if you want and just put that in, and if by the time you get in sort of half an inch, if the soil is dry, you need to water it. Now, pak choi has been really good. And we've been enjoying that for the last, 5 weeks or more? But I have noticed a difference, and I don't know if any of you guys have noticed this too. Please let me know in the comments if you have. But the green pak choi, you can see, is starting to rise to flower. So we're not going to be enjoying that for much longer. But this red variety, not at all. We keep picking the leaves from it. It's perfectly happy for us to keep picking its leaves, but it's not sending a flower stalk up. Now, I know that people have said to me in the past, on previous videos, about how their pak choi is always going to seed, running away and sending a flower stalk up. So it may be that this variety across here might be of interest to you. Now I can't tell you what its name is because it was actually a free pack of seed that was sent to me. It was a trial, and as you can see by the label, it's only known as KN9040. I shall contact the company where I got that seed from and ask them, are they continuing with it, and if so, does it now have a name? If it does, then I'll let you all know. And then if you want to give it a try, happy days. Maybe one that doesn't bolt so frequently. And I've got to say, it's the first time actually that I've actually eaten a red variety of pak choi. We normally always grow the traditional green. There wasn't actually any particular difference in its taste. Pak choi, it's pak choi, just a different colour. Now we have been up here harvesting some radish. You can see they've grown away really quite nicely, and we multi-sow these, so all we do is just take the largest ones out that we want. We did have 1 or 2 yesterday, didn't we, Mrs. W?
We did, and very nice they were.
Yeah, very nice they were too. You know, they're to a good size. And most welcome at this time of the year. Now when we came out first thing this morning, of course one of the first jobs that we always need to do is to feed our chickens. And of course at this time of the year, even though they have fresh water, overnight of course it freezes. So clearly one of the first things that we did this morning was to take that water, break through the ice. We actually emptied it out and put some fresh water in. And we're having to do that most mornings. The chickens are really lucky because they have ourselves to, look after them, ensure that everything is okay. But all the birds that are flying around, there are many. I can see birds flying over there. They're everywhere at the moment. In fact, there's one up there. They too need water. And, if you're like us and you leave some water out for the birds so they can't get to it, of course, they will suffer with the same problem. That will be frozen. So just ensure that you go out there, break the water up, and maybe put some fresh water out every day for them to help those through this cold snap that we're having. Because the birds, although sometimes we think of them as a bit of a pest and they do some damage, in the main they do far more good than they do damage. They will come along and they will feed on all those soil-borne pests, things like slugs, snails. They will take those and help to control that population and keep the whole biodiversity of the garden in balance. So there you have it. Not the video I planned, but these things, they happen. But I do think it's really good, just to sometimes do a little bit of a tour around the garden and show you what our garden's like at the moment, because you could be waking up this morning new to gardening and thinking, oh dear, what am I going to do? My plants are dying. Oh no, actually they're not dying. They've gone into self-preservation mode. They will pick themselves up as soon as this cold snap just turns and we get some slightly milder weather. So don't stress yourself. These plants are bred to be in the ground now, to give us harvest, to be able to cope with the weather that we're getting now. You often see me here, and this is my faithful old lion. He's been here ever since we moved here. Mrs. W bought me that. But he does rather look like he's been eating spaghetti. Either that or he needs his mane chopped. Yeah. You see all of the weather, don't you? And you keep an eye on things for us. Now, I do hope you found this video useful. And if you have been a bit concerned about the weather, as I say, if you are new to gardening and you have been a bit concerned about the weather, hopefully that's helped you feel a bit calmer about things. Please do leave us your comments down below. We do so love getting your comments, and we do try to get round to answering just as soon as we can. It's time I went and warmed up now, because broad beans that need potting on, they do like a pair of warm hands around them. We shall see you next time.